Broncos fans, preseason football is like your high school girlfriend that you never want to see once college starts up again. It is in the rearview mirror, which means we could talk about some real football. We're talking about the G-Men Week 1. So if you're ready to watch Von Miller actually go out and play 4 quarters instead of 4 series, go ahead and subscribe right now so we can give you the best Broncos news and rumors content all 2021 regular season long. Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown. I'm Matthew Peterson. Today's a big day in the NFL, but it's a sad day for a handful of players as it is cut day, and the Broncos trimmed the roster down to the mandated 53-man maximum limit. And with that being said, let's dive into some of the players cut this season going into the regular season. Leading things off, it's QB Brett Rypien. Quickly, just to touch on this one, I think he's going to be on the practice squad. I think he knew that as well when they traded for Teddy Bridgewater. But the next one's a little more interesting. It's Tyrie Cleveland, the draft pick from a year ago who had some playing time last year, was always a roster bubble kind of guy, and just didn't get the job done enough in preseason to earn himself a spot on the initial roster. I don't think Cleveland's going to be packing up his Denver apartment. I bet he's going to be on the practice squad this season, but it's probably the biggest name of all the cuts coming out of Denver, but I do expect him to be returning to the Broncos on a practice squad position. Next up, it's QB1, Kendall Hinton. That was fun for a week, wasn't it? So, Kendall Hinton finds himself also cut today. Again, this is another guy that I think is a little less likely than Cleveland, but still likely to be on the practice squad. And keeping it in the wide receiver room, 6th-round pick from the 2021 NFL Draft, Seth Williams. Yeah, Williams' time with the roster is done for the time being. Let's see if he can find a home on the practice squad. And same for Pierson-El. It's just too much competition, and the Broncos made the switch there and put him on the cut list. Next up, these aren't surprising either. Running backs Demarius Crockett and Stevie Scott. Both were really, really long shots to make the roster. Best case scenario for them was a practice squad spot. So let's see what GM George Paton wants to do there. Again, this is the 2021 NFL season. There's room for just one fullback on this roster. Talking to you about the New York Giants. So Adam Prentice as well, not a chance. Austin Fort too. And then Shaun Beyer. I mean, these are just tough names from the get-go. This is not big or breaking news. And on the offensive line, the Broncos were pretty well suited up front. They were really trying to figure out that second tier. So this is where some more interesting cuts happen with Quinn Bailey was a guy that I thought had a chance to make the roster. I think he's going to end up on the practice squad. But again, these are up-in-the-air players from the get-go. You never quite knew what you were going to get out of them going into training camp. And checking out the last bunch of players that were cut, altogether the Broncos cut 22 guys, and none of them were jumping out at you. Sometimes teams want to make a veteran presence, and they didn't do that with any players they cut, but they did release some veterans, which is a little bit different. We'll talk about the nuances of it in a moment. But first, one quick note to touch on your screen there. Oh, we lost him, but Parnell Motley was a guy that I thought had a chance of making the roster. I don't think he's done in Denver. But anyway, let's talk about the release/pup list here. Cam Fleming. He's going to get $1 million from the Broncos, whether he plays or not, and I fully expect him to be returning to Denver because GM George Paton just said so. The Broncos can put some players on the short-term IR tomorrow when that window opens up, and Paton already said the moment they do that, they're going to bring Fleming and Shamar Stephen back onto the roster. They just didn't have room because it's a numbers game. So those two guys, they have one sad day, and then they smile tomorrow when they get the phone call that they've been put on the active 53-man roster. 2 players on the PUP list there at the bottom, and they're going to be out of action for at least 6 weeks. But let me know down in the comments, who do you think is the biggest surprise of roster cuts of the bunch here? Personally, I'm thinking Tyrie Cleveland. I thought returning after last season when he got some playing time and actually was an active player on the roster for a couple Sundays, he would make the roster this year, but competitive training camp in Cleveland, just one too many drops, and ultimately not a big enough special teams contributor to make George Paton smile enough and get him on that roster initially. Broncos released the initial 53-man roster, and it's been a lot of fun talking about the quarterbacks. It's been a fun battle all training camp long, but no surprise, these two guys make it. Depth chart, which is nothing new, TB1, Teddy Bridgewater, and then Drew Lock, the backup to start with. And then, like I said, Brett Rypien, I think, will make the practice squad, but that's where he is right now. The biggest news, though, in the NFL cross-cut list was Cam Newton. Now, don't shoot the messenger here, but there have been some murmurs and some ideas of maybe Cam Newton coming over to Denver, given their lack of complete certainty in the quarterback room. So, personally, I wouldn't do it, okay? One, it just, you've had these two guys in training camp all season long. It wasn't like Newton put a great body of work out last season. Two, I'm a history guy, and history tends to repeat itself. And there were some rumors that maybe Newton was released from New England because of the COVID situation and not being vaccinated. And if that's the case and he is going to be in close contact with someone in Denver, well, you know how this story ends. It ends with Kendall Hinton at QB1 because the whole room could be knocked out. So let me know in the comments, should the Broncos sign Cam Newton? S for sign, P for pass. I'm giving it a capital P. Running back depth chart here, Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams, they're going to be one of the best duos, I think, in the NFL. And here's another player that will end up on that short-term IR list. Boone on the right, he's been injured since that first joint practice with the Vikings, and he's going to be on that list to open up a roster spot for Fleming or Steven. And Royce Freeman squeaks his way on because tomorrow Boone will be on that short-term IR, and the Broncos need 3 running backs. Broncos fans, if you are ready for more content all season long, then go ahead and subscribe right now for the best news and rumors throughout the entire regular season. Getting ready for that Week 1 matchup against the New York Giants. I think this Broncos defense will give Danny Jones a very tough start to the season. On to the wide receiver depth chart here. This is a loaded room that was always filled with competition, and ultimately they walk away with 5 names for now, which is a little surprising. I thought they'd roll with at least 6, but this is going to be changing. It is going to be evolving behind the front 4, but for the time being, it's just De'Mornay Spencer there. And I think the big surprising news is, where's Trinity Benson, right? The MVP of training camp. Well, he's in the Motor City. He got traded to Detroit this morning. I mean, Paton was just working late into last night. You check out the trade details. Lions get Benson and a 6th-round pick in the 2023 NFL draft, while the Broncos pick up a 5th and a 7th in the upcoming draft. Personally, I think you could look at this 2 ways. I think for the Broncos to get 2 draft picks for a player that's never played a regular season snap is pretty good, but he was really fun. He was great to watch all preseason long. I know he was a bit of a fan favorite, so that's a tough one to say goodbye. Best of happy trails to Benson in Detroit, where he immediately, by the way, becomes the 3rd wide receiver on the depth chart, compared to in Denver, where he was probably 6. Tight end room, no surprise here. This was never really much of a competition all training camp long. They sneak in the fullback/tight end Andrew Beck as well. But again, the tight end room, this was never much of a battle throughout the training camp process. Offensive line for the Broncos, it's got a lot of positives, but for me, the biggest question mark is that right tackle spot. When you've got Bobby Massey and Calvin Anderson, who were battling all preseason long, ultimately I think Massey will be the one ahead, but that's still going to be a revolving door. And then, like I mentioned earlier, Cam Fleming will return to the Broncos tomorrow once they clear up some space. And I think what that really speaks to is the fact that they are just not in love with Massey or Anderson, so they want to add a 3rd guy to the rotation. Offense, though, what do you think? Who is the biggest roster snub on the offensive side? Could it be Cleveland? Benson's a whole separate category since he was traded, but let me know what you think down in the comments for the biggest roster snub on offense. Broncos fans, our friends over at BetUS have a fantastic deal set up for you guys, and it's super simple. All you've got to do, head over to chatsports.com/bet. Once you're there, use the promo code Broncos125, and they're going to put on an extra 125% deposit bonus, so you can put $100 and make it $225 on that Broncos money line against the G-Men, and I'm loving that bet right now after seeing Denver cruising through the preseason. On the defensive side, the Broncos go with 6 guys for the time being. Again, this was a position that wasn't too contentious, except for the back couple positions. Again, Shamar Stephen, he was cut, and he's going to be brought back in a moment once the Broncos make a little room on their roster, putting some players on short-term IR. And Deshaun Williams, he makes it there. And also, shout out to Jonathan Harris as well. He was a long shot. He was a roster bubble guy, but he squeaks in and he gets that 6th and final spot on the defensive line for the Broncos. And this is a D-line that I think is going to be one of the better D-lines in the AFC. They're going to be very exciting to watch throughout the regular season. 10 linebackers make the depth chart for the Broncos. Big number right there. And the latest member of the bunch right there, the new name, right? It's like the first day of school. Jonas Griffith was traded from the San Francisco 49ers, and he slots in that number 10 spot. He was brought in purely for special teams. I mean, Paton is making a statement here. We've been bad on special teams. Jonas Griffith, he can supply good special teams play. Let's ship off some future draft late picks we don't need for some immediate impact on special teams. And so Griffith takes a 10th roster spot on that linebacker depth chart here. Also want to shout out Andre Mincy, okay? He continues what's been an unbelievable streak for the Denver Broncos. What he's done here is he is the 16th of 17 undrafted rookies to make the Broncos roster in the last 17 seasons. So 16 guys have made the Broncos roster as an undrafted free agent in the last 17 seasons for the Broncos. So tip your cap to Andre Mincy out of Vandy for keeping that trend going. And perhaps the most loaded room across the board for the Broncos, this depth chart. Wow. I mean, it is just, one of the best across the I would say the best across the NFL. Why are you doing the one of? Let's get to the point here. One other note to make, though, you check out right below Kyle Fuller, Ojemudia. He's also going to be put on short-term IR, which is going to open up a roster spot to bring back Steven for that defensive line. So he'll be out at least 6 weeks, but who even needs him when you look at the top 4 names right there? And now the guys in the back, the last line of defense. And this was a position battle that was kind of fun to watch because you had Caden Stearns, P.J. Locke, and Jamar Johnson all fighting for maybe just 2 spots. And instead, they make Paton lose so much sleep, he just keeps all 3. He couldn't decide, so he takes 5 safeties, which just speaks to the volume of the talent the Broncos have in their secondary. Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert are going to have a horrible day passing against this Broncos defense. I would toss in Derek Carr, but he does enough damage to himself, so you don't have to worry about that. Defensively, who is the biggest roster snub in your opinion? Let me know in the comments. Personally, there's not a big one jumping out at me because Paton already said in his press conference they're going to bring back Steven. And that was a free agent signing from the 2021 class. But let me know. Maybe I'm forgetting someone. Hop down in the comments and tell me who the biggest roster snub is on defense. Finally, it's the special teams trio. These guys get their own table at lunch, and they have fun together because Brandon McManus is one of the best kickers in the NFL. He never was going to be in a battle. Martin was in a battle for a minute, and that ended really, really quickly. And so Bob and Mower, it's a long snapper. What do you want me to say here? Why are we even talking about this? But now it's time for you guys to get the red pen out and let me know. Be the professor. Grade this Denver Broncos roster on a scale of 1 to 100. Don't shoot me, okay, but I'm going to go with like an 86. And the reason why I put that number right there is the quarterback room is just too much of a question mark. It's too foggy for me to give it closer to a 90, but the defense is going to be one of the best in the NFL. great running back duo, excellent wide receiver core. Everything's aligned. It's just down to Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock for one of them to figure out and nail down the quarterback position.